Live in a Better Way is a collection of talks given by His Holiness the Dalai Lama. The Dalai Lama offers us a clear and penetrating insight into the problems facing humankind and how love, compassion, and universal responsibility are required to skillfully solve these problems. In Compassion and Nonviolence, the Dalai Lama reveals that the ultimate cause of our violence-prone world lies within the human mind. He explains the further need for training and transforming the mind through moral self-discipline and meditation, and how a compassionate mind leads toward a better humanity and happier future. Following his talk, the Dalai Lama answers questions that were asked by his listeners. Compassion and Nonviolence.
I have no idea how to solve global crises, so it's better to talk on a practical level. Today, in addition to natural disasters, there are various man-made problems, such as the events in Bosnia. In our daily news reports and on TV, we can see how much these innocent people suffer. In other parts of the world, too, there is a great deal of killing, murder, even cases of children killing children. Sometimes people ask me, "What is your advice or suggestion?" I usually tell them I have no idea. These problems, I believe, are the result of long-standing negligence. These events did not come about suddenly. They have their causes and conditions. One cause and condition creates another cause, another condition, and so on until things finally get out of hand. Most of these events are a result of human emotions out of control. When such calamities take place, it is very difficult to deal with them. Human emotion has to be combined with proper intelligence, which means intelligence with human affection. One can't be sure whether mere intelligence is destructive or positive and constructive. Intelligence with affection, on the other hand, can produce marvelous results. Intelligence usually ceases to work when emotions are out of control. Nowadays, many situations have reached that stage. If we ask certain individuals, even leaders, "What is your purpose in killing one another?" they may not have a clear answer. By killing, they simply let out their negative and blind emotions, inflicting heavy suffering on other people. So, what is it we learn from these events? In the future, if we want a happier humanity, a happy world, we must tackle the root of the problem. Of course, the economy and political power are also causes, but the ultimate cause lies within the human mind. Every human action, verbal or physical, even a minor action, has some motivation. Ultimately, everything depends upon our motivation. Proper motivation or proper development of motivation is an important factor. Thus, if intelligence is accompanied with human affection and compassion, what I call human feeling, then it is very useful. The modern educational system pays too much attention to knowledge and to the brain and does not give enough attention to spiritual development. People leave it to religious organizations and others to take care of. I don't think that's sufficient. Although all world religions have the potential to make a tremendous contribution to the development of a good heart, even that's not sufficient. Moreover, many people feel that religion is something that is old-fashioned or out of date, and religious people themselves are also at times a little too orthodox. They remain a little isolated from the real world and daily problems. Sometimes, many religious traditions, including the Tibetan tradition, place too much emphasis on ritual or ceremony without having a proper understanding of its meaning. Therefore, the religious contribution and influence are also limited. It is not enough to let just religious communities handle moral issues. The problems are usually too big, and the group of people who are to handle the problems too small or too weak. Take the case of the United States or some other countries. We can see clearly that they are facing some kind of moral crisis. They are either increasing their police force or seeking some other technical solution to their problems. Unless some positive developmental change occurs in each individual's heart, or unless there is some transformation there, it's very difficult to control external forces. Therefore, each of us, as a part of the human community, has the responsibility to do something for humanity. Because if the future of humanity is good, bright, and peaceful, we will all receive the benefit. If humanity degenerates morally, corruption, exploitation, bullying, and cheating will all take place, as a result of which society will suffer. Although there are laws and regulations in each country, mischievous people always find ways around them. If society's moral values and standards of behavior become negative, each of us will suffer. Therefore, the intentions of an individual are very much related to the interests of society. There is a definite correlation. We should not think that the problem is a huge one and that the individual is too small. My efforts will never have an effect on that immense problem is not the right way to think. The problem may be big, but if every individual takes the initiative, then there is a real chance. If each individual remains isolated, neutral, and indifferent, and expects dramatic change from others or from the sky or from meditation, that's ridiculous. Of course, prayer has its blessing and a limited effect. But the main effort must come from ourselves. Buddha and God have certainly had some kind of influence, but basically, each individual has to make an effort with complete confidence. Whether we achieve satisfactory results or not, it is logical and worthwhile to make an attempt. In spite of your constant effort, if you don't achieve the desired result, it doesn't matter. At least you will not have regrets. When unfortunate events occur due to our negligence, it is far worse and regrettable. Therefore, each of us must realize our potential and make the effort. I have spent most of my life outside my own country as a refugee. Many Tibetans trust me. They have great expectations, and my task or responsibility is very great. There have been a lot of difficulties. Throughout this period, in spite of the many difficulties and problems, it seems to me that when I compare my experiences with those of other people, I am quite a happy person. Of course, when there is bad news or something tragic happens, I experience anxiety, sadness, and frustration, but that does not remain for long. In spite of the circumstances, my mind remains relatively stable and peaceful. This has helped me a great deal and enabled my wisdom and intelligence to function normally without much disturbance, and so I sleep without any difficulties. And since my mind remains comparatively calm, my digestion and health are fine. As a result, I get many benefits. A lot of Tibetans who experienced intense torture and other difficulties and lost their families have been able to maintain their mental stability and calm. What is this inner strength that enables one to maintain calm in the face of difficulties? It is not the result of external factors, medicines, injections, drugs, or alcohol, nor some kind of external blessing. Inner strength stems from true training of the mind. Regardless of whether one is a believer, through mind training, one can shape one's attitude. As a result, a person becomes calmer and more at peace, and able to handle difficult, urgent, and even the most complicated matters better. past experience and discussion with other experienced people also contribute to the smooth handling of problems. There's no doubt then that problems at the family, community, and even international levels can be reduced if they are man-made. The educational system and family life are two very important areas. In the educational field, one has to take care not only of the brain, but also of one's spiritual development. I say spiritual development, not in a religious sense, but simply in the sense of having a good and compassionate heart. If one has a compassionate heart, it automatically brings inner strength and allows for less fear and less doubt. Subsequently, one becomes happier and more open-minded, and thus making more friends in society. When we consider education from the teacher's point of view, it is quite clear that teachers must impress upon the minds of students the value and effect of human affection through their conduct and actions. On the other hand, it is important to limit the size of a family through birth control measures. It is essential to have fewer children, only as many as we can properly take care of. Apart from education, one must instill in them the value of human life and affection. The media is another important area. In modern times, the media often spells trouble, but generally it is very useful. In democratic countries particularly, freedom of the press is extremely useful. Freedom of the press enables them to sort out scandals and curb corruption. It is important to put forward a balanced view in the media, to portray both the negative and positive aspects. Very often newspaper reports focus on the negative things, murder, rape, robbery, and so on, and do not carry sufficient coverage of positive issues. There is hardly any news of how many children or how many sick people receive the benefit of human kindness and affection. An overdose of negativity leads the general public to believe that human nature is basically negative, and that idea ultimately leads to a great deal of frustration. One also loses self-confidence. This is both tragic and dangerous. So the media plays an important role, and religious people have their special responsibility in this context. From every angle and through various professions, one must promote the value of the compassionate mind. Although it is not easy, it is the only way toward a better humanity and a happier future. I shall now explain something about the method of Buddhist practice. First, I would like to stress the importance of harmony among different religions. In spite of differing philosophies, all the major world religions have a similar message and similar advice for humanity. There are some extraordinary persons who follow different religions who have totally transformed their inner state. As a result, they are truly compassionate and wise. This implies that all these different traditions have the potential to produce such inner transformation in the human mind. So, whether we like it or not, these major religions will always remain. In the past, many people have benefited from these traditions, and the same holds true for the present and the future. Therefore, it is extremely important to have genuine harmony among the religious traditions. It is possible since there is a common ground. Once we know more about other traditions, we automatically develop more respect and appreciation for them. Genuine mutual understanding leads to mutual respect. And as far as Buddhism is concerned, it involves the training of the mind. Buddhism emphasizes the training and transformation of mind because all events are the result of one's actions. We call that karma. Our future depends on today's actions. That is the law of karma, or the law of causality. Of verbal, mental, and physical actions, mental action is supreme. Mental motivation is the key factor. The same verbal or physical actions can at times be positive and other times negative because of different mental motivations. In some cases, with certain motivation, actions that are normally considered negative can actually become positive. Mental action is thus superior and the critical factor, and all events ultimately depend upon our own mind. The ultimate goal is moksha, or liberation. Moksha is a mental state where all grosser mental afflictive emotions are completely eradicated. Moksha, or nirvana, is a mental quality. And finally, we have Buddhahood. Once the mind and awareness are fully developed and awakened without any obstacles, the state of Buddha's mind is reached, that which we call enlightenment. That is also a mental quality. The subject to be transformed is the mind. The transformer is also the mind, and the resultant transformed state is the mind as well. Some people describe Buddhism as a science of the mind. There are a lot of explanations in Buddhism about the nature of mind at the conventional and ultimate level, and a distinction is made between different kinds of mental thought. Tantrayana, the Buddhist vehicle for Tantra teachings, makes a very precise distinction between different levels of mind: gross, more subtle, and innermost subtle. Since the method to transform the mind is in itself of the nature of mind, meditation becomes a very important part of Buddhist practice. You cannot change your mind without meditation. There are two kinds of meditation: analytical and single-pointed. The actual weapon against negativity is analytical meditation. Through analysis, one can develop a new conviction or awareness. As this awareness increases, opposing forces are reduced. Analytical meditation destroys negativity. Vipassana, or special insight, is a particular kind of analytical meditation. In order to stabilize that analytical meditation, a forceful, single-pointed meditation is crucial. Our mind is usually so scattered that when we want to analyze something, we use the energy of only a part of our mind. A lot of energy is wasted. Through shamatha, single-pointed meditation, we channel all the energy of the mind. We unify it like hydroelectric energy. When water is sprinkled, it can't move forcefully. When the same amount of water is channeled, its energy or force increases. Our mind is scattered, and yet by nature it has the capacity for knowledge. But because it is so scattered, its effect is very limited. Therefore, it is necessary to channel the energy of the mind through shamatha, or single-pointed meditation. One also needs to keep in mind the aspect of motivation. The key factor that motivates all action, even worldly action, is the motivation to attain the path that leads to Buddhahood, or enlightenment. For that, the key factor is bodhicitta, the mind of infinite altruism. Altruism here refers to the wish to attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. So with this motivation, the different types of meditation actually lead to Buddhahood. As the early Indian master Aryadeva states in his 400 verses, our goal, Buddhahood, means complete elimination of all negative stains of the mind, including the imprints or predispositions called obscurations to Buddhahood. The practice must proceed step by step. In order to eliminate these imprints of the delusions, first we have to eliminate all the mental defilements. As a first step, we need shila, disciplined moral conduct. Whether one is a monk or layman, there is no difference in this respect, that the first principle is shila. The main thing is to abandon the 10 non-virtues, the physical ones: killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct; the verbal ones: lying, divisive speech, harsh talk, and idle gossip; and the mental ones: covetousness, harmful intention, and wrong views. In order to practice moral conduct and self-discipline, the key factor is constant mindfulness in our daily life. For instance, when we are about to talk to someone, we should constantly check whether we are about to lie or not. And in our daily life, we should constantly check our physical, verbal, and mental actions. Sometimes, in a particular situation, one might have to be slightly deceitful. In order to save the lives of many people, for example, it is permissible to tell a small lie. Except for such cases, one must be very truthful and honest. At times, we are far too polite, and this creates suspicion. Honest, open, and beautiful speech always carries some weight. One should also be kind and refrain from harming others. In this context, vegetarianism is extremely good. I myself tried to become vegetarian in the early 60s and remained a strict vegetarian for about 2 years. However, I developed some physical problems, which is why I am not a vegetarian anymore. These days, I am vegetarian on alternate days, so effectively, for 6 months of the year, I am vegetarian. Recently, in India, while driving from Dharamsala to Jammu Airport, I noticed a lot of chickens in tiny boxes. It was a terrible sight. Those who live in coastal regions survive on fish. Thousands of fish are killed every day. In order to satisfy one human stomach, so many lives are taken away. We must promote vegetarianism. It is extremely important. We should save the lives of other species. Another example, sexual misconduct is one of the main factors responsible for destroying the peace of the family and humanity at large. Sexual self-discipline is greatly required, especially now when all over the world we have this terrible disease known as AIDS. If moral self-discipline is practiced, the quality of life becomes better, and one is a happier person whom others respect. These practices not only lead to ultimate happiness, but immediately create a very positive atmosphere in our family and community. And the individual, too, is happier. On the surface, the life of a nun or monk seems unattractive. The layman's life appears more attractive and colorful. Our lives may seem less colorful, but in the long run, I think the mental state of nuns and monks is more balanced. Undisciplined people have a very colorful life, sometimes too happy, at other times too frustrated. Their life is like a yo-yo. This isn't good for the body. A calm and steady mental state is more desirable. By practicing restraint, we also make a tremendous contribution toward harmless birth control. This is moral conduct on a daily basis. Our real enemy is negative human emotions, such as hatred, jealousy, and pride, the real destroyer of our future and our happiness. It is very difficult to fight this enemy without taking proper defensive measures. Self-discipline, although difficult and not always easy while combating negative emotions, should be a defensive measure. At least we will be able to prevent the advent of negative conduct dominated by negative emotion. That is Shila, or moral ethics. Once we develop this, by familiarizing ourselves with it, along with mindfulness and conscientiousness, eventually that pattern and way of life will become a part of our own life. Shila is the basis on which you directly engage with negative emotions. When you have a strong body, your hand is strong and steady, and you can effectively use the axe to cut a tree. Shila is like that energetic and strong body. With a strong and steady hand, you can hit your target repeatedly on the same spot. Samadhi, or concentration, is like that hand. And wisdom is the axe that actually cuts the tree. What then is Vipassana, or special insight meditation? There are many varieties of Vipassana. Meditation on death, impermanence, and many other connected meditations. The main Vipassana meditation is on the wisdom that arises from an analytical meditation that realizes and meditates on the ultimate nature of oneself, others, and all phenomena. That ultimate nature is Shunya. When we talk about Shunya, the ultimate nature that we call nothingness, it is the absence of independent existence. In order to realize Shunya, we must first be attentive to the differences between appearance and reality. Very often, there are contradictions, things that appear one way while reality may be quite different. But to our sense organs and to the brain, everything appears as if it exists by itself, independently existent. If things truly exist as they appear, then they should get clearer through analytical meditation. But if we investigate, we cannot find them. There is a difference between appearance and reality. The realization of ultimate truth, or the ultimate nature of all phenomena, directly influences negative emotions, because generally all negative emotions are based on the construct that things exist independently. That is the second level, the direct engagement, combating, and controlling the inner enemies that are the negative emotions. When you gain victory over these emotions, that is the stage of liberation, moksha or nirvana. It still does not mean that everything is fully under control. A few snipers may still exist. So, in order to eliminate all these sniper-like imprints of negative emotions, we require a lot of effort. When I explain Buddhahood or moksha, sometimes people get very excited. And when I elaborate that in order to reach that goal, we have to go step by step, people sometimes lose patience. That is not positive. I think that in some cases, we Tibetans lack seriousness. We know Buddhism very well, but in terms of practice, we are sometimes lazy. Some of our new Buddhists, especially from the West, are very, very serious, sometimes a bit too serious. After a few years, they lose interest in it completely. Seriousness is good, but only if accompanied by patience. Without patience, it tends to bring disaster. Cleansing all the imprints of negative emotions is rather difficult. Whether believers or not, we are human beings first. And as human beings, we have the wonderful capacity to know the positive and negative consequences in the long term, as well as the short term. Morally, we have the great responsibility of looking after not only fellow human beings, but other species of animals, other sentient beings, and our environment as well. Therefore, we should try to lead good, qualified, worthy human lives, be good human beings, and more warm-hearted persons. This will automatically bring more happiness to our individual life and to our family and community. It automatically benefits oneself as well as others. Those of us who consider ourselves Buddhists should practice the Dharma, the Buddha's teachings, sincerely and not be contented merely with the intellectual level. Implement it in daily life with constant effort. Time is a very important and major factor. If we expect great things right in the beginning, great spiritual change in the mind within a short period, it is not a healthy sign. We must count eons. It really gives us inner strength. Our scriptures tell us that in 3 years we can achieve Buddhahood. I think this is impractical. Sometimes there is a bit of exaggeration here and there. Of all our great yogis, saints, and practitioners, I haven't heard of anyone who has achieved Buddhahood within 3 years. So, asking for 3 years is not enough. We must plan well, not only for this year, not only for this life, but for life after life, centuries, and eons. When I think about eons, great, countless eons, it really makes me genuinely calm, and I get real inner strength.
What is happiness and what is life? What is enlightenment?
According to one's own experience, one feels satisfied, calm, and happy. Happiness is happiness. Everybody is trying to achieve it. Plants have life, but I'm not sure if they have feeling or not. We, on the other hand, experience pain and pleasure. When we talk about sentient beings, we refer to beings that have life as well as these painful and pleasurable experiences. Enlightenment, as I mentioned briefly before, is total knowledge. No ignorance and no obstacles. Our subtle mind, what we call the clear light, has every potential to become enlightened and fully awakened. But now, because of ignorance, there are many obstacles in the face of full awakening. When all the negative factors disappear, the power or force of awareness is fully developed, and that is what we call enlightenment.
Many teachers say the realization of the absolute can happen in an instant, as opposed to through a long path. Please comment.
It does happen sometimes, but only with many causes and conditions. In some cases, it happens at an invisible level. When causes and conditions are fully ripe, then it occurs instantly. Certain extraordinary spiritual experiences do take place.
How can compassion be generated or developed in one's life, and how can it be practiced?
Through analytical as well as single-pointed meditation. Analytical meditation involves the constant examination of the value of compassion. Once you become a more compassionate person, you have real conviction. You become a calmer and happier person, have less fear and more self-confidence. You become more open-minded and have better communication with other people. You gain more friends and more smiles. On the other hand, examine hatred. What is its value? Hatred destroys one's own happiness, one's family's happiness, as well as happiness at the national and international levels. If you are to remain in a 3-year retreat and you meditate on hatred, you will never experience calmness. You will always feel uncomfortable, and eventually you will lose your appetite, your sleep, and your life. That is what hatred does. So, you see, like a scientist, we must try to examine the positive and negative aspects of these things constantly. Try to get rid of the negative aspects and promote or produce positive qualities through analysis. Similarly, when we talk about the mind, it is not just one single entity. There are many, many thoughts and many, many minds. Some are positive, like medicine. Some are negative and are much, much worse than even poison. As in material things, you retain certain positive aspects and discard others. So it is with the mind. Those minds that bring us more happiness, calm, or inner strength, and friends are positive. Minds that eventually destroy these things are obviously negative. So, analyze these things. Once you get some kind of conviction and full ascertainment through analytical meditation, ponder on it for a short while. If you are a believer, recite some mantras. That is the way. Some analytical meditation, then at the end, single-pointed meditation. When the force of that conviction reduces, engage yourself in analytical meditation again.
When all religions teach compassion, love, and brotherhood, how is it that human beings are fighting in the name of religion?
In most cases, individuals are simply happy to label themselves. For instance, I can say, I'm a Buddhist, and be content with it. People don't bother about their daily practice, conduct, or thinking. They don't bother to go deeper into the meaning. Buddhism, in my case, is supposed to guide me and my conduct. It is both a way of thinking and behavior as well as the means to reshape these. But sometimes one doesn't regard it that seriously. So, if I have no intention of changing according to Buddhist ideals, but continue to use Buddhism, claiming it as my religion, then I am utilizing Buddhism because I need religious strength. Similarly, when you say, I am a Christian, you invoke all Christianity as your support, and you are never touched by their tradition and are never changed. When a totally ignorant, frustrated, or hateful person uses religion, it is a disaster. What you should do is check yourself. Consider yourself a practitioner and a sincere follower of that tradition. It is only then that you will become a different individual. There are certain sincere practitioners who, out of ignorance and lack of contact, believe only in their own religion and consider other religions wrong. In some cases, it is the result of teaching, but usually it is due to lack of contact, lack of awareness and real understanding of the deeper value of the other tradition. Once you realize that there are wonderful people among Christians and Muslims, you automatically develop an appreciation for their tradition. The follower of each religion should check for oneself whether he or she is following it sincerely or not, and whether it is being practiced genuinely. Constant communication or exchange with other religions is required. There should be constant meetings, first among the leaders, second among the scholars, and third among those people who have deeper experiences. Meetings between these people are essential. Once you know each other's deeper values and the potential for the negative in the human mind, once you know each other, it is very helpful.
Is it possible or advisable to show compassion to someone who continues to harm or hurt you?
Oh yes, of course. That is most important. The enemy or the other person who is trying to harm or is harming you, although that person's attitude toward you is negative, is after all a human being, and also has the right to overcome suffering and achieve happiness. On that basis, you have to cultivate compassion toward that person. That does not mean that you just bow down in front of your enemy. There are different reasons enough to feel compassion, and also, in some cases, sufficient reason to confront the enemy. These are two different things.
In the next question, the Dalai Lama is asked about his visit to an ashram for people with leprosy. The ashram, which is in India, was started by a disciple of Mahatma Gandhi, Baba Amte, who is known for his treatment and rehabilitation of leprosy patients.
Could His Holiness please describe his visit to Baba Amte's project? What can we learn from Baba's practical form of compassion?
Practical compassion. I believe that is the proper way to develop India. Having just a few industries near cities is not enough. Of course, it is both good and necessary and a part of development. But real transformation and change of India should come through the works of people like Baba Amte, work that is done at the grassroots level. I am particularly impressed by the new colony. I was told that it was just empty, uninhabited land earlier. Now it has been transformed into a small village full of human spirit and self-confidence. When I was there, a patient who had only 2 fingers was using a hammer very forcefully. I think because I was there, his force was even stronger. I was a little worried that his hammer may hit his own hand. That place was full of life, and the people had no feeling of inferiority, only a sense of equality. We shook hands without any hesitation. It was all very wonderful, very beautiful. I was greatly impressed.
You said that ultimately everything depends upon our motivation. How do we develop that motivation?
Through training of the mind, through analysis based upon one's own past experience. to examine one's past as well as the past experiences of others, like Mahatma Gandhi or Baba Amte. When I met Baba Amte, in spite of his physical difficulties, he had a smile on his face. He was full of life, full of spirit, and radiant. That is the result of compassion and self-confidence. People like Hitler or Mao Zedong had such tremendous power, but they were full of suspicion and hatred. I think Mao was quite a sophisticated person, full of confidence, but he was suspicious of even his best comrades. Once there is such suspicion and hatred, a person cannot be happy. Therefore, compassion is important because all of us want to be happy in life.
If we are all human beings, what is the difference between you and me?
I think there is a great difference. You are you, and I am me.
The Dalai Lama speaks further about the possibility of eliminating all negative thoughts and emotions. He spells out practical ways for dealing with anger.
There is a possibility of eliminating all negative thoughts. As time goes by and the deeper the meditation, coupled with analytical meditation, negative emotions and thoughts can be eventually eliminated. This state of mind, having eliminated negative emotions, is what we usually call nirvana, moksha, or cessation. Cessation does not mean the cessation of our consciousness or cessation of oneself. It means cessation of negative emotions. People get the impression that cessation or nirvana is nothingness and that all feelings, consciousness, and things dissolve in emptiness. There is nothing left. That is wrong. Actually, nirvana is the completely purified state of one's own mind. It is the ultimate nature of mind that has removed all afflictive emotions. It is our responsibility to feel, yes, there is a way and something worthwhile to achieve. So we should try to investigate the suffering nature of life, and on getting frustrated with that, we should develop the feeling of renunciation in order to achieve nirvana, which is permanent liberation. Actually, our real enemy, the real troublemaker or destroyer of happiness, is within ourselves. For example, anger, hatred, attachment, and extreme greed are the destroyers of inner peace, whereas the external enemy, no matter how powerful, simply cannot destroy inner peace. If someone is mentally calm and peaceful, it does not matter even if that person is surrounded by hostility, because the person will feel very little disturbance. On the other hand, if you are mentally unhappy, restless, or disturbed, even if you are surrounded by best friends or the best facilities, you will not get peace and happiness. So inner peace and the source of it are the inevitable end or result of a tranquil and settled mind. Thus, the inevitable and ultimate cause of mental calmness and happiness cannot be any external factor. The ultimate source of mental peace can be destroyed only by one's anger and negative thoughts. A wise person will not allow anger or hatred to manifest themselves because nobody wants unhappiness or suffering. If you want to attain happiness, you must take care about the ultimate source of happiness. You must practice love, kindness, and try to reduce your anger. These are not religious matters, but concern our daily happiness. At the ordinary level, when negative thoughts of anger and attachment arise, These appear effective and helpful. For instance, when we are facing a problem, losing or failing, anger comes as a protector or supporter. Anger tells us not to fear and allows itself to be expressed. An angry person is almost mad and uses harsh words or indulges in harmful physical actions, and so on. In a way, anger gives us a boldness or force. Similarly, when attachment arises, it comes as our best and dearest friend. Thus, unless we analyze very sincerely and seriously, it is very difficult to realize these are negative thoughts and realize their negative and false quality. When anger dominates our mind, we sometimes use harsh and unpleasant words. But when anger subsides, we feel embarrassed to withdraw our words, and so we avoid meeting the person we have had differences with. This shows that basically we do not want to use harsh words, but anger at that time made us lose all control. Therefore, anger is an enemy and is not useful or reliable. In some other cases, we need a strong countermeasure against anger. When something happens, analyze and thoroughly investigate the situation. If it needs an effective countermeasure, take it without anger, as any action motivated by anger will be ineffective. Also, in many cases, decisions taken under the influence of anger are usually found to be wrong. Hatred and anger make us lose our appetite and sleep, and we suffer mentally. The enemy actually feels happy seeing us depressed. On the other hand, however, if we remain calm and in a very happy mood, the enemy is not able to feel any satisfaction. Furthermore, anger really destroys our sense of judgment that can discern long-term and short-term consequences. Having an enemy is useful because it gives us the opportunity to practice patience and tolerance. This practice is highly necessary for the development of genuine compassion and love. We cannot learn real patience and tolerance from a guru or a friend. They can be practiced only when we come in contact with someone who creates unpleasant experiences. According to Shantideva, the 8th century Indian yogi, enemies are really good for us as we can learn a lot from them and build our inner strength. The practice of love and compassion is not a religious practice or a sacred thing, but a question of survival. In terms of humanity, I think the economy is facing a global crisis, and there is, of course, the question of world peace. In every field, the important factor is compassion and a good heart. Here we have to distinguish between love and compassion. Usually, people are impatient in love, as love is mixed or polluted with attachment. The indication of such a pollution is that our love is dependent on how the other person responds to us. For example, if someone is very close to us and something distasteful happens, our attitude changes immediately and the love disappears. However, there is another kind of love that is genuine, where one realizes that the other person is like oneself, who wants happiness and does not want suffering, and who has every right to overcome the suffering and achieve happiness. On that basis, a genuine love and kindness is developed, and that remains in the relationship. When we talk about the importance of love and kindness, we refer to genuine love, and not to the love and kindness that are greatly influenced by ignorance. Sometimes people say that when anger arises, it is better to express it rather than hide or suppress it. Of course, there are different levels of anger. The first and foremost thing is to realize the negativity of anger and hatred. Once you are convinced of that, you naturally try to distance yourself from it. Yet, if strong anger arises and is difficult to suppress, just try to forget about the object of anger. Take, for example, my own practice and my own experience. I am from Amdo, in the northeastern part of Tibet. people from these areas are generally regarded as being very short-tempered. When I was young, even I had that trait. As time passed, I practiced these things to subdue my mind. My anger has reduced greatly. On certain occasions, anger or irritation arise, but they disappear quickly, and I have hardly any feeling of hatred. Thus, it is through practice that you can bring about your inner development. There is a possibility of change. In order to change, we must first change ourselves. If we don't change, nothing will change, and expecting others to change is then quite unrealistic. The human mind is always changing, and if you make some effort in the right direction, ultimately, mental changes will occur, and you can get an enormous amount of peace and happiness without any pain or expense. Peace and happiness must be developed within oneself. As Buddha says, you are your own master. One's future entirely depends on oneself. Nobody else can take care of one's future life, and the present rests on one's own shoulders.
Anger is the truth. It must coexist with happiness. Then why should one control it?
If you ask doctors, they will tell you that we can do without anger in our lives. You will get more pleasure and happiness if you try to minimize anger. So, the valid question, really, is whether anger can be reduced or not.
Please explain a simple technique to reduce anger.
A more analytical examination of the real shortcomings of anger will help. Anger destroys one's peace of mind and creates further trouble. If you look at world history, you can see that all destruction, human misery, and suffering were mainly caused by hatred and anger. The glorious stories about good revolved around altruism. Thus, you will realize that anger is really worthless. If someone accepts the theory of rebirth and karma, cause and effect, other methods can be used to reduce anger. Family problems are most often created by anger, so you can learn from the experiences of others.
The Dalai Lama next explains how the journey to happiness is through understanding the nature of samsara, or cyclic existence, and through the realization of shunyata, emptiness. He also refers to the Four Noble Truths.
It is worth remembering that in northern India, over 2,500 years ago, Prince Siddhartha Gautama, motivated by the wish to understand why suffering exists and how, if at all, it can be overcome, renounced his father's kingdom and left the palace in search of the true nature of all existence. After studying for 6 years with many great Hindu teachers and engaging in many austere practices, Prince Siddhartha decided to follow the middle path between the extremes of the overindulgence of his former palace life and the self-mortification of his more recent practices. At what is now Bodh Gaya, Bihar, he sat beneath the Bodhi tree and meditated in solitude until he realized his goal: complete, full, unparalleled enlightenment, or Buddhahood. About 7 weeks after his enlightenment, he gave his famous discourse on the Four Noble Truths. He explained that 1. The nature of worldly life is suffering. 2. This suffering has a cause. 3. This suffering can cease completely. And 4. There is a path to this cessation.
The Dalai Lama reminds us that the Four Noble Truths are the foundation for Tibetan Buddhism, and mentions the two main schools of Buddhism, the Hinayana and the Mahayana. The main difference between the Hinayana and Mahayana traditions lies in the motivation of their practitioners. The basis of Hinayana practice is to follow the path of ahimsa, nonviolence, and to strive for individual liberation from suffering. The Mahayana practice is to strive for enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. Ideally, Mahayana practitioners should dedicate their activities to helping others by leading them to enlightenment. The term for this mind of ultimate altruism is bodhicitta. Those unable to generate such extensive motivation are exhorted to at least not do harm to others, which is the Hinayana practice. The Sutrayana and Tantrayana are Mahayana schools. The Sutrayana is the vehicle of sutra teachings and stresses scriptural texts and the teachings they contain. The Tantrayana is the vehicle of practices that include identifying oneself with an enlightened deity. The Tantrayana school is also known as the Vajrayana school. The Dalai Lama explains in greater detail some of the aspects of Tantra teachings. A journey to happiness.
As human beings, we are basically all the same. After all, we all belong to the same planet. All sentient beings have the same innate nature that wants happiness and doesn't want to suffer. All of us love ourselves and desire something good. Now, as far as material development is concerned, we have already achieved a great deal, and every nation on this planet is aiming for better facilities and is attempting to create a more prosperous society. Eventually, we may achieve that. However, material development alone is not sufficient for human happiness. The reason is quite simple. Human beings are not the product of a machine. We are something more. Therefore, we need more than just external objects in order to be happy. The most important thing in life is human affection. Without it, one cannot achieve genuine happiness. And if we want a happier life, a happier family, happier neighbors, or a happier nation, the key is inner quality. Even if the 5 billion human beings that inhabit the earth become millionaires, without inner development, there cannot be peace or any lasting happiness. Some people may be very rich, but we often find that they are not happy at all. Affection, love, and compassion are some of the most important elements in our life. Peace of mind is crucial for good health. Of course, good facilities, the right medicine, and food also make a difference, but happiness is the most important factor for good health. Everybody is concerned about world peace. Weapons or military force, under certain circumstances, at certain times, can produce some relative peace. In the long run, however, it is impossible to achieve genuine and lasting world peace through military confrontation or hatred and suspicion. World peace must develop through mental peace, mutual trust and mutual respect. For that, again, compassion or the altruistic mind is the key factor. Let us consider the significance of a happy family. The most important thing is affection. Whether we are successful in life or not depends a lot on the atmosphere we grow up in. Children from families full of love and compassion are happier and more successful human beings. On the other hand, a child's life may be ruined if he or she grows up in fear or lacks love and affection. Where does affection come from, and how can one develop or increase human affection? So long as the human mind exists, the seed of affection exists. Although negative and positive thoughts and emotions are all part of the human mind, the dominant force in human consciousness or human life is affection. Therefore, the seed of compassion is a part of one's nature right from birth. When we are born, we are free from all ideology and religion, which come later. But we are not free from the need for human affection. A baby cannot survive without it. Affection is an important element in conception. Human affection and compassion are not just about love or seeking pleasure. True compassion is not only about sympathy or a feeling of closeness, but a sense of responsibility as well. Genuine compassion is generated when we realize that people who suffer or lack happiness or prosperity want happiness just like us. Compassion is about developing genuine concern for them. Usually we think of compassion as a feeling of closeness toward our friends, but that is a view tainted by mental projections. As long as a person is a close friend, we have a positive attitude toward him or her. As soon as that person's attitude changes, or as soon as our feelings toward that person change, compassion ceases to exist as well. This is not really compassion, but more of an attachment. Genuine compassion involves analyzing the situation regardless of whether the person is close or not. The fact remains that the person has a problem and is suffering, and has the same right as I do to overcome the suffering and be happy. As human beings, we have intelligence and extraordinary abilities. Those who have more intelligence are more farsighted, and those who are more able also have a greater responsibility toward themselves as well as others. In fact, human beings are responsible not only for other human beings, but for the well-being of other sentient beings and our planet as well. If we utilize our intelligence and abilities in a destructive manner, it will result in disaster and tragedy. We must utilize them constructively instead. I am quite sure that those with extraordinary intelligence and ability who manipulate other people or things for their own benefit end up having some deep regret. I think that both humans and animals have an innate appreciation for truth. If we treat dogs or cats sincerely, they appreciate it. If we cheat them, they realize that and don't like it. If one human being communicates truthfully with another, it is appreciated. If we cheat others, they will react accordingly, whether they are believers or non-believers, rich or poor, educated or uneducated. Therefore, compassion and honesty exist because we don't want to cheat people, and because we all have the same right to be happy. Compassion, as I mentioned earlier, is a combination of sympathy and concern, a feeling of closeness with a sense of responsibility. Some people feel that compassion, love, and forgiveness are religious matters. This is wrong. Love and compassion are imperative. There is no way we can ignore these things, whether one is a believer or not. They are necessary if we want happiness and if we want to be good citizens. As far as religion is concerned, if accepting a particular religion makes you comfortable, then you should take up that religion. If you do not want to, it doesn't matter. Leave it. But it is important to understand the nature of compassion, because it is a basic and necessary human quality. Happiness is a mental quality. Machines cannot provide us with it, nor can we buy it. Money and wealth are only partial sources of happiness, not happiness per se. These will not produce happiness directly. Happiness must develop within ourselves. Nobody can give it to us. Its ultimate source is tranquility or peace of mind. It doesn't depend on external factors. It doesn't matter if we lack good facilities, a good education, or a successful life, as long as we have inner confidence. Concern and regard for others and human affection are extremely important factors for our happiness. Compassion gives us inner strength, a feeling of inner value. Try to become a good human being with a warm heart, regardless of whether you are a politician, a religious person, a business person, or whatever. One's individual behavior can contribute to the making of a happier family and community. Different religions come into being at different times and places. I feel that the various religions simply strengthen good human qualities. They minimize negative qualities while maximizing the good ones. All major world religions have the same message as far as love and compassion are concerned, although their expressions may be different. All religions realize the importance of love and forgiveness and have the potential to create and increase good human qualities. Through the centuries, millions of people have benefited immensely from various religions. It is very unfortunate that different religious identities cause quarrels, turmoil, and disunity. If we study the different religions and observe their potential to produce good human beings, there is enough reason to develop genuine respect for all religions. There are two categories of religions. One group of religions I call theistic religions, such as Christianity, Islam, Judaism, and Hinduism. These uphold a fundamental belief in God. Another group of religions that I call godless religions, such as Buddhism, Jainism, and Sankhya philosophy, an ancient and sophisticated component of Hinduism, believe there is no God, no Creator, and no Almighty. Ultimately, the Creator is one's own self. One group, mainly the Buddhists, does not accept the theory of a permanent soul. This demarcates Buddhism from non-Buddhism. The fundamental Buddhist theory is that there is no permanent soul or self. Within Buddhism, there are two distinctive groups on the basis of the motivation of the practitioner, the Hinayana and the Mahayana. The motivation of the Hinayana practitioner is mainly with one's own moksha, or salvation, through the practice of moral conduct and the convergence of mind and wisdom. The motivation of the Mahayana practitioner is not to think only of oneself, but to have concern for all living beings, and pursue the practices of the 6 or 10 paramitas, or perfections, to ultimately achieve Buddhahood. The essence of Buddhist conduct is ahimsa, or nonviolence. Nonviolence, as used here, has two directives. If you can, help and serve other sentient beings. If you cannot, then at least do not harm others. Why is nonviolence so important? Because of the law of interdependence, that all things are interrelated. For example, survival depends on many factors, as does one's happiness. Similarly, pain and tragedy depend on many factors. Just as we are concerned with our own happiness and experiences, we should also be concerned with their causes. The theory of interdependence is interpreted differently according to the various philosophical schools of Buddhism. According to one, the meaning of interdependence is that all conditioned phenomena depend on causes. This implies that there is no creator. Things depend only on their own causes, and those causes in turn have their own causes, with no beginning. Everything changes because of these causes and conditions. New circumstances produce new events. These in turn act as causes and produce something different and new. The theory of interdependence, expounded by another school, involves everything being dependent on its parts. There is an even subtler level of interdependence. When we investigate, for example, what a flower actually is, and closely examine its particles, the flower ceases to be the flower we know. If we investigate who am I, we fail to find an I apart from this body, brain, or experience. If one goes deeper into the ultimate nature of oneself, one cannot find an independent and ultimate identity. We conventionally label the combination of body and mind and say, this is a human being. This Tibetan flesh and mind from Amdo we label Dalai Lama Tenzin Gyatso. After much analysis, however, if we really want to look for the Dalai Lama, we cannot find him. Similarly, we use terms like past, present, and future all the time. In a way, the past is mere memory. The future is just our thought, a plan, or an idea. The present is real. In our internal experience, I think that there's no past and no future, only the present. But if there is no past or future, there can be no present, since the present depends entirely on the past and the future depends entirely on the present. If we investigate, we do not really find anything. Ultimately, we find something that is empty. However, this emptiness is not mere nothingness. Since all things are interdependent, independent identities or entities don't exist. When we investigate the ultimate nature of everything, we find it is the absence of independent existence. This is what we mean by empty. I am here, and this is not a dream. This is not an illusion. It is real. If I pinch myself, I feel pain because I have a body. I have a forefinger and thumb, and they function. So there is something after all, and yet we cannot find it in the ultimate analysis. In other words, emptiness and interdependent nature are two sides of the same coin. The Buddha first taught the Four Noble Truths: true suffering, true origin of suffering, true cessation, and true path. He taught them because suffering has causes and conditions, and we do not want to suffer. He spoke about the origin of suffering. The Buddha taught us to identify suffering as well as its causes at different levels. Our goal is happiness, which again depends on its own causes. Happiness can be temporary or permanent. Permanent happiness is more important, which is why the Buddha taught the third noble truth, that of true cessation. The cessation of suffering is the attainment of nirvana, or the state of blissful happiness. He also spoke about the means by which one can actualize the state of the cessation of suffering. That is the true path. The Four Noble Truths consist of an explanation of happiness and suffering and their causes. The purpose of our life is happiness. From birth we have the right to be happy, and lasting happiness must develop within ourselves. Nobody can give it to us, and no external factor can be responsible for it. It must be achieved through our own inner development. How do we integrate the Four Noble Truths into our daily practice? First, it is important to know what mind is. People sometimes get the impression that the mind is an independent entity, separate from the body. Such a mind does not exist. We cannot find an independent I outside our body. Buddhists do not accept an independent I, a permanent soul or self. Some say that as soon as the human brain ceases to function, the human mind ceases to exist. If that is so, then what about the theory of rebirth? The mind develops on the basis of causes and conditions, both immediate and distant, direct and indirect. For example, the mind that perceives a flower depends upon many conditions. One is the eye. Without this organ, even though we might have consciousness of the flower or the flower before us, we will be unable to perceive the flower. On the other hand, the mind and eye alone, without the flower, could not develop an awareness of the flower. And if there was a flower and a perfect eye but no brain, again we would not be aware of the flower. The consciousness or mind is just a subtle energy upon which everything can be reflected. Its own nature is merely luminous. Besides the human brain, there are conditions, deeper and more subtle causes of human consciousness. without which the human mind cannot develop. We call that the clear light, the innermost subtle mind. An indication of this innermost subtle mind is that at this moment, while we utilize our sense organs fully, their level is very gross. But when we dream, certain organs are not active, or their functions are reduced, and the mental state is deeper. And in the state of deep sleep, without dreams, our mind attains its deepest level. Another indication is when doctors declare someone dead, and we find that the body remains without decaying for a few days, and in some cases a few weeks. Because the innermost subtle mind is still present in the body, it continues to function. Therefore, in a deeper sense, that being has not yet departed from the body. The owner of the body, a controlling power, is still present, which is why the body does not decay. But medically or conventionally, that body is considered dead. As far as I know, there have been at least 10 or 15 such incidents in India over the last 30 years. In my senior tutor's case, after he was declared clinically dead, he remained in the state of clear light for about 13 days. Because of that, we believe that there can be deep memory about past lives. Under certain conditions, you can reflect on past experiences on the basis of clear light. Some practitioners go very deep when they meditate, and the grosser consciousness or grosser level of mind becomes inactive. Then they have memories of past lives of 100 years ago, or in some cases, events of several hundred years ago are somehow reflected in their mind. Our explanation is that the innermost subtle mind is always present. Although momentarily changing, its continuity is permanent. So there are two levels of mind. The grosser level of mind depends entirely on this body. But the most subtle mind is everlasting. On this basis, rebirth takes place. The mind's own basic nature is ultimately neutral. It can be influenced by negative as well as by positive emotions. Take, for instance, those who have a short temper. When I was young, I was quite short-tempered. However, the mood never lasted for 24 hours. If negative emotions are in the very nature of our mind, then as long as the mind is functioning, the anger must remain. That, however, is not the case. Similarly, positive emotions are also not in the nature of the mind. The mind is something neutral, reflecting all sorts of different experiences or phenomena. Those emotions, such as compassion, love, and wisdom, that produce a happiness more subtle, permanent, lasting, and satisfactory, are positive. That is because we consider happiness as something good and something we must achieve. Everything that can help in that direction we consider positive. These positive emotions ultimately transform us into happier persons, more reliable and trustworthy. If we objectively examine the value of anger, hatred, jealousy, doubt, suspicion, or fear, we see that there is no profound basis for such emotions. From a Buddhist viewpoint, these negative emotions are ultimately based on ignorance. Ignorance here refers to a consciousness that perceives the nature of objects as having an independent existence. This ignorance or misconception, no matter how powerful, can be eliminated. Through investigation and meditation, we can develop deeper understanding. Subsequently, the negativity will be reduced and ultimately eliminated. That is the nature of mind. We all have an innate desire for happiness. Happiness and unhappiness depend on positive and negative emotions. The ultimate nature of mind is pure, so there is a possibility of reducing the negative emotions and increasing the positive ones, achieving permanent happiness. That is nirvana. Once you understand the goal, only then can you eliminate the negative emotions. It is done through practice and the training of mind. In order to develop genuine, tireless effort, we need determination. For that, it is extremely important to think about and understand suffering. For example, when we think about sufferings like old age, sickness, and death, we will be able to generate a spirit of renunciation or a wish to free ourselves from cyclic existence or samsara. The ultimate goal is Buddhahood, which we can achieve through meditation and certain other practices. It may take eons, or it may take 1,000 or 100 years. To develop self-confidence, it is useful to meditate on the preciousness of human rebirth. With the help of the human body and human intelligence, we can do everything if we make an effort. We have teachings regarding Buddha nature or Buddha seed. This enlightened state, the ultimate nature that every sentient being possesses, proves that there is always the potential to eliminate negative emotions. Thinking along these lines helps to develop self-confidence. A lot of people, especially in the West, have low self-esteem. I think that is very dangerous and really foolish. We have a body, our brain, and wisdom. If we make an attempt through meditation and altruism, it is possible to develop our mind. With time and effort, it can change. By constantly reminding ourselves of positivity and negativity, things change. Self-confidence, whether in religious practices or worldly life, is a very important element. Compassion is a very crucial factor here. A more compassionate mind automatically opens some kind of inner door. It becomes very easy to communicate with fellow human beings, animals, and insects. When our own attitude is open and there is nothing to hide, it immediately creates a basis for friendship. However, a negative emotion like fear closes that door. Unless you create that kind of groundwork yourself, it is very difficult to acquire genuine friends. Whether others respond or not, if you smile without suspicion and doubt, there is a greater chance of getting a smile in return. Negative emotions negate this possibility. One then deliberately isolates oneself from the rest of humanity, and as a result, resentment, loneliness, fear, doubt, hopelessness, and depression arise. Compassion, on the other hand, gives us inner strength. It opens our inner door and brings about better experiences. The concept of Buddha nature, the concept of the preciousness of this life and this body are very important for developing self-confidence. We also have the teaching of impermanence, which is also very pertinent. I want to mention here that very often people mistakenly believe that egoistic feelings are negative and that one should have no ego at all. I think there are two types of ego, just as there are two types of desire. Of the two types of feeling of I, the feeling of the strong I that forgets about others' rights and in which one considers oneself more important than others is wrong. The other type of ego that makes one feel, I can do this, I can help, I can serve, is positive. This kind of ego develops tremendous determination in the people who possess it. For them, days, months, years are nothing. They count eons, not 1 or 2 eons, but millions, countless eons. Such an inconceivably long time does not discourage them. Nor are they discouraged by the countless sentient beings whose numbers are limitless. Their determination is to do something for an infinite number of sentient beings for an infinite period of time. Such unshakable determination is impossible without a strong, solid ego. That ego is positive. It is necessary, useful, and constructive. We must develop it. The other is the foolish ego, which disregards others' rights, forgets others, and wants to gain something by exploiting others. Now, with that kind of ego, ultimately, one will lose and suffer. Similarly, there are two kinds of desire. One is desire with a purpose that is good. This desire leads to determination. According to Buddhists, we ultimately reach Buddhahood because of this desire. The other desire is without a reason, a mere I want this, I want that. This kind of desire without a proper basis very often leads to disaster. Some people get the impression that since the teachings identify desire as the source of all suffering, all desire is wrong. This is a misconception. The next practice is impermanence. Here again, there are two levels. One impermanence is at the grosser level, like death or other misfortunes or when certain experiences change or end. The more subtle impermanence is that of momentary change. Modern physics has also explained this. For example, this flower in front of me is changing at a very subtle level, ever changing in a wave-like fashion, like energy. This is subtle impermanence. The realization of impermanence is very useful and important because you realize that it occurs simply through its own causes. Therefore, the disintegration or impermanent nature of phenomena does not depend on the need to encounter new causes and conditions. Due to their very nature of being produced by their causes and conditions, they are subject to disintegration and change. Take the case of our body or our life. From the Buddhist point of view, there is no possibility of permanent happiness as long as everything is controlled, influenced, or governed by ignorance. Once ignorance is eliminated, nirvana is achieved. As long as the same mind is influenced by ignorance, and as long as that situation lasts, that is samsara. As soon as ignorance is eliminated, suffering ceases. That is moksha or liberation. Moksha or salvation is not a state of bliss or something external. It is an internal quality. Thus, the awareness of the deeper level of impermanence is very helpful in order to develop the desire or determination to achieve liberation. In this way, when we think about the different levels of the nature of impermanence, we enter the second scope or second stage of practice of meditation on the path to enlightenment. By reflecting on the meaning of the grosser level of impermanence, we generate a strong aspiration to achieve something better in the next life. And when we think about the nature of the subtle level of impermanence, we generate a strong aspiration to achieve nirvana. Just as we are concerned for ourselves and think about ways to remove suffering and how to actualize nirvana and liberation and the state of ultimate happiness, if we turn our thoughts upon others and concern ourselves with the welfare of other sentient beings and reflect upon the removal of their suffering, we generate altruism or the wish to actualize enlightenment for their benefit. That motivation is bodhicitta, the determination that is needed if we want to achieve Buddhahood. It is quite marvelous that the human mind can generate this kind of determination or firm will. Once one develops such a precious mind of bodhicitta, irrespective of the religious context, one becomes extremely courageous, warm-hearted, and useful to society. According to the practice of Buddhist religion, bodhicitta is such a wonderful or marvelous quality that generating it, all negativities are purified, and all positive qualities come alive. Once you generate such a precious mind, that mind ensures a good rebirth, or good path in the future as well. In other words, it prepares you for the journey on the path to enlightenment. After that kind of determination comes the practice of the 10 paramitas, or perfections. Of the 10 paramitas, there are 6 main perfections: generosity, morality, patience, effort, concentration, and wisdom. That is the way of Mahayana Bodhisattva practice. In addition to that, we have the Tantrayana practice. In Tantric teaching, it is very important to visualize oneself as a deity. Not mere visualization. One has to meditate on shunyata, or emptiness. then that wisdom is transformed at the level of one's imagination into the deity's form, Buddha's form. Furthermore, holding that form or Buddha's body as the subject, one reflects on the nature of the emptiness or suchness of it. So you reflect on the nature of the deity and at the same time on its ultimate nature. Thus, very powerful wisdom is combined with determination on the basis of bodhicitta. In Maha Anuttara Yoga Tantrayana, one unique practice is making a distinction among the gross, subtle, and innermost subtle levels of mind. There are techniques to neutralize the grosser level of mind, after which the innermost subtle mind becomes active. That subtle mind then is transformed into wisdom. In Tibetan Buddhism, you combine the basic teachings of the Four Noble Truths with bodhicitta and the 6 paramitas, along with deity yoga and certain kinds of yoga practices. First, you lay the foundation and then build on it in order to reach the summit of the practice. It is important to know that without the practice of Tantrayana or bodhicitta, and with only the practice of the Four Noble Truths, you can achieve liberation. On the other hand, without a practice on the basis of the Four Noble Truths, teaching just the 10 paramitas or Tantrayana is impossible. The teachings are the ground floor, first floor, second floor, and so on, of a building. Without the ground floor, it is impossible to build the first floor. It is important to understand this because people are sometimes impatient and want Buddhahood immediately without considering the Four Noble Truths or the 6 paramitas. We must go step by step.
Why do we come to this world?
Nature is nature. There is no answer.
Why should we try to eliminate suffering? Is it not an essential part of life as much as happiness?
If you are satisfied with daily life with all its suffering, then that is best. You do not need to worry or make an effort.
If one is in great anguish and realizes it as the effect of past karma, but cannot bear the suffering, what should one do? Can prayer help?
According to some traditions like Buddhism, confession of negative actions is one method. The Tibetan Buddhist Tantrayana tradition recommends recitation of different mantras, making certain images or relics, and many religions have the practice of generosity. In addition, one should pray.
Is it possible to bear somebody else's karma for that person?
Generally speaking, according to Buddhist teaching, you will not encounter the results of an action that you have not committed. And once you have committed an action, the result will never get lost, and you have to experience it. Here I think it's quite important to make a distinction. When you suffer, you feel not only pain or discomfort at that moment, but also a kind of helplessness and discouragement. You are completely enshrouded in that suffering, and there is a kind of darkness. Compassion is when you have concern for others' suffering, and share their suffering on the basis that others have an equal right to be happy. The suffering at that moment may make you unhappy or cause a little discomfort. But that discomfort is voluntarily accepted with reason because of these realizations and the decision to share others' suffering. Therefore, the discomfort and unease leave no trace of darkness on your mind. You have to be very clear and very alert if you voluntarily take on others' suffering.
Can you say something about good and bad?
Good and bad, from the Buddhist point of view, are relative terms and depend on other factors. Under certain circumstances, something may be good, but under other circumstances, it becomes bad. So there is no absolute. We have to judge according to particular circumstances. Generally, we can say that any action or any factor that brings us happiness or satisfaction is good. Anything that brings us unhappiness or pain is bad. So the ultimate decision about good and bad is based on experience and feeling. Our mind has the final word. I think it is mental tranquility that allows us relaxation and happiness. This holds true for everyone. Another practice is that of altruism. As things are interdependent, our own satisfaction or happiness depends largely on others. If other people, including animals, are satisfied and show happiness or some kind of a positive response, we will be satisfied. Therefore, the practice of altruism is the key factor.
In Transforming Mind, the Dalai Lama introduces us to the daily practice of reciting the 8 verses for training the mind. The 8 verses were composed by the 11th century Tibetan scholar Geshe Langri Tangpa. Transforming Mind.
In order to practice Buddhism, you have to first know about the mind. Even if you are a non-believer, you can try to improve or train the mind, provided you have knowledge of it. Essentially, this is what the 8 verses for training the mind are about. They teach us how to deal with our negative emotions and subsequently improve or transform our mind. As a practitioner, you must pay heed to your mind to constantly try and control it. You should try to eliminate all negative emotions and develop positive ones, infinitely, particularly in the practice of Buddhism, since some people say that Buddhism is the science of the mind. Everyone wants happiness. Nobody wants to suffer. Many problems around us are a mental projection of certain negative or unpleasant things. If we analyze our own mental attitude, we may find it quite unbearable. Therefore, a well-balanced mind is very useful, and we should try and have a stable mental state. Everybody wants a healthy body, and nobody wants to be sick. I, for one, don't like falling ill, but very often I get a cold, especially when I visit Bodh Gaya. Almost every time I'm there, the blessing is so great that I always get the flu. But the fact remains that everybody wants good health, and one of the important means for attaining it is a stable mind. Mental training is crucial for good health. Good health and stability of the mind signify a good and happier life and a sound future. Although a person may be in a hostile environment, if one's mental attitude is firm and stable, the hostility will not be a cause for much disturbance. Without inner mental stability or the right mental attitude, one cannot be happy, calm, or at peace, even if one is surrounded by the best of friends or the best facilities. This is why training the mind is imperative and should not be considered a religious matter. Some technique or method for training the mind should be a part of everyone's daily life. The mind is colorless, formless, and difficult to identify. Yet it is powerful. Sometimes it seems difficult to check, change, and control. I think much depends on time, will, determination, and wisdom. If we have determination and wisdom implying knowledge, the point then is how to train the mind. You can train your mind by analyzing the shortcomings of anger, as well as analyzing other people's experiences. It is also useful to look at history. Whenever I examine human tragedy, I find that in most cases it is the result of human behavior. Negative emotions such as anger, hatred, jealousy, and extreme greed. All good things that are constructive, happier human experiences are mostly motivated by respect for others' rights and concern for others' well-being, compassion, love, and kindness. A very thorough investigation of past human experiences and events and one's daily practice is imperative to bring about change and improvement. We human beings are similar in our desires. This is why training the mind is important. For human beings, as well as animals, the foundation of society is affection or love. During the period when we are in our mother's wombs, the mother's mental stability and calmness are very important for the development of the unborn child. Also, the first few weeks after birth are a crucial period for development of the brain. During that period, it is extremely important to have the mother's physical touch. This shows that the physical condition itself needs the warmth and affection of others. The human baby's first act after birth is sucking milk. Giving or receiving milk certainly does not stem from hatred or negative feelings. Although at that time the baby's mind is not clear and does not have a clear idea of its mother, a bond or feeling of closeness is definitely established. However, if the mother's mind has anger or some negative feelings toward the child, the milk may not flow. It is deep affection and a feeling of intimacy toward the baby that allows the milk to flow properly. And turning to the mother for milk is our first act as human beings. Over the next few months and years, we are heavily dependent on others, mainly our parents or guardians. Without their kindness and responsibility, the child cannot survive. As students, we find that if a teacher is affectionate or close to us, then the lessons as well as the teacher leave a lasting impression on us. From time to time, we need to visit doctors, even if we don't want to. Although the doctor may be highly qualified, if the doctor's face is stiff and bereft of a smile, we feel slightly uncomfortable. If the doctor shows genuine concern about our health and is affectionate, we feel comfortable. When we get older, we depend heavily once again on the affection and kindness of others. This is human nature. Since human beings are social creatures, we depend heavily on one another in order to survive. Even small animals and insects like bees and ants possess some kind of social instinct. They have a great sense of responsibility and work together in tandem. If we look at bees, we find that they work on the basis of cooperation, even though they have no religion, constitution, or laws. Their natural form and way of life demand that they work together. Otherwise, they cannot survive. Humans claim to be superior beings, but we are, in fact, sometimes inferior to these small insects. Our basic situation demands that we live together and, hence, work together. It is a natural law, but sometimes we act in quite the contrary manner. According to Buddhism, plants have no mind or consciousness. As a Buddhist monk, I say they have no consciousness, but I don't know. It's difficult to tell. I think we need to investigate further. Some people say that plants have some kind of feeling or cognitive power. Even without consciousness or mind, their very existence is based on the cooperation of each particle and cell. Each particle has a special duty or role, and all the particles work together to allow the plant to survive and develop. Similarly, the function and existence of the world, the planet itself, even the universe, depend on cooperation. Different parts of the human body work together, allowing us to function effectively. Our existence and survival depend on the cooperation and coordination of these parts. Take, for instance, the human family. In the absence of cooperation and understanding, parents and children are always fighting. The same is true of quarrels between couples. Cooperation is imperative for a healthy family, body, society, and nation. How does one develop cooperation? By force? Impossible. So what is the alternative? Voluntary actions, altruism, and showing concern for the welfare and rights of others. These need not be considered sacred. They are in one's own interest because one's survival depends on it. For example, if you are concerned about other people and genuinely friendly toward them, then other people will also respond appropriately. I love smiles and laughter. If one wants more smiles in one's life, one must create the right conditions for it. Certainly not through anger, jealousy, extreme greed, or hatred, but through loving kindness, an open mind, and sincerity. If your motives are sincere, there is nothing to hide, and you get an open attitude in return. This is the real and proper channel of human communication, and not mere lip service. From my own experience, sometimes I find I can communicate sincerely even when I don't know the other person's language. But at times, it is difficult to be candid. When people have power, others tend to flock around them. I think I have more friends now because of the Nobel Peace Prize. These friends may not be very reliable. People with fame, power, or wealth usually have many friends. If the person loses his power or wealth, these friends may disappear. I consider such friends insincere. True friends share genuine closeness and remain friends irrespective of fluctuating fortunes. Such concern for others is a great virtue, but it is also selfish, in a way, since it's ultimately for one's own benefit and interest. Very often I tell my friends that if we have to be selfish, we should be wisely selfish. If we are sincere, we will have reliable friends and benefit greatly. If you neglect others, forget about their welfare, and think only about yourself, eventually you'll be the loser. Thus, the basic structure of human society requires a sense of responsibility based on altruism and compassion. The ultimate source of happiness is altruism. Success in life depends on determination, will, and courage, and the source of this courage and determination is altruism. The Buddhist technique or method to improve the mind is based on the theory of interdependence, or pratitya samutpata. This is mainly concerned with the causes of pain and pleasure and the fact that everything is interlinked, creating a chain reaction. According to Buddhism, there is a commensurate relationship between cause and effect where pain and pleasure are concerned. The immediate cause is karma. Karma means action. Tomorrow's events depend very much on today's actions. This year's events on last year's, while this century's events are linked with those of the previous centuries. The actions of previous generations affect the lives of the generations that follow. This is also a kind of karma. However, there is a difference between actions carried out by a group of people or sentient beings jointly and actions carried out by a single person. In individual cases, the actions of the earlier part of one's life have an effect on the latter part of one's life. What, then, is the source of action? What is the motivation of mind? And more important, what is mind? Is it the brain or a kind of energy produced by the brain? The answer is both. It is both because while the grosser level of consciousness is produced by the brain, the ultimate source of consciousness is the innermost subtle consciousness that is not dependent on the brain. The most subtle consciousness or mind has no beginning and no end. According to Buddhist philosophy, every sentient being who has a mind and consciousness has the potential to become a Buddha. This subtle consciousness is termed Buddha seed or Buddha nature. In Mahayana Buddhism, the ultimate goal is Buddhahood or enlightenment. One should be determined. This determination is called bodhicitta, which is the basis of the Mahayana teaching of infinite altruism. To develop bodhicitta, or the mind of infinite altruism, we have to first know about the Four Noble Truths. It is possible to end suffering or bring about its cessation. In order to do that, we have to know what suffering is and what causes it. Only then can cessation be achieved and the true path followed. It will help us if we develop determination and altruism. As I have said, the 8 verses explain the importance of altruism and how to preserve it when we come across difficult situations in our daily life. They teach us how to deal with our negative emotions and subsequently improve or transform our mind. We should recite the 8 verses every day, making them a part of our daily life. When we are faced with problems, we should immediately read, recite, and practice the 8 verses. This is difficult to implement, but it is better to make an attempt so that we have no regrets later. 1. With the determination to accomplish the highest welfare for all sentient beings who excel even the wish-granting gem, may I at all times hold them dear. This verse proclaims that in order to achieve Buddhahood, we must develop infinite altruism and create good actions. We depend heavily on other sentient beings. Without sentient beings, we cannot develop infinite altruism and cannot achieve Buddhahood. We owe our fame, wealth, and friends to other sentient beings. For example, without other sentient beings, one cannot have woolen clothes, since one cannot have wool without sheep. The media is responsible for fame, and so on. Even reputations are dependent entirely on other sentient beings. From conception till death, our life depends on others. It is important to realize how other sentient beings are precious and useful. As soon as we realize this, our negative attitude toward other beings will change. 2. Whenever I associate with someone, may I think myself the lowest among all and hold the other supreme in the depth of my heart. Our attitude toward other people should always be positive. We should be concerned about others without feeling pity for them. Above all, we should treat them with great respect, for they are precious. We should consider them as sacred and superior to ourselves. 3. In all actions, may I search my mind, and as soon as klesha or delusion arises, endangering myself and others, may I firmly face and avert it. 4. When I see beings of a wicked nature, pressed by violent sin and affliction, may I hold these rare ones dear, as if I had found a precious treasure. Verses 3 and 4 explain how to control one's negative emotions. Our mind is greatly influenced by negative emotions due to our infinite past lives, and it is extremely difficult to develop altruism. We have to fight constantly against these negative emotions. We have to use different methods to deal with the forces of anger. It is difficult to control sudden, intense anger. You should simply try to forget about the object of anger and divert your attention. Concentrate on your breathing. This cools down the anger slightly. Then try to think about the negative aspects of anger and minimize or get rid of it. One way to deal with the anger toward one's enemy is to focus on the enemy's good qualities. Try to develop respect and sympathy instead. On the one hand, our enemy creates problems for us. On the other, that very person gives us the opportunity to practice patience and tolerance, two qualities necessary for compassion and altruism. When extreme greed or other negative emotions arise, one should be prepared for them. If you take a lenient attitude when the negative emotion arises, it becomes stronger. So reject or try to reduce it right from its inception. 5. When others out of envy treat me badly with abuse, slander, and the like, may I suffer the defeat and offer the victory to others. 6. If someone whom I have benefited with great hope hurts me very badly, may I behold him as my supreme guru. Verses 5 and 6 are difficult to practice, but essential if we want to develop genuine altruism. If we are humble and honest, a certain someone might take advantage of us. Even in such situations, we should not harbor any negative feelings toward that person. Instead, we should analyze the situation. Allowing that person to do whatever he or she likes will ultimately be harmful for that person. Therefore, we should take some countermeasures. We should do this not because that person has harmed us, but because we should be concerned about the person's well-being in the long run. When anger dominates our mind, the best part of the human brain, which judges situations, fails in its function. We may then use harsh words unintentionally. Hateful words pour out automatically due to a lack of control when we cannot handle a situation. Once the anger subsides, we feel ashamed of ourselves. 7. May I directly and indirectly offer benefit and happiness to all my mothers. May I secretly take upon myself the harm and suffering of the mothers. Verse 7 tells us to benefit other sentient beings more than oneself and take on their suffering. This can be practiced through deep breathing, taking in suffering and breathing out happiness. One can also do this by visualizing or training the mind through focusing on the object of meditation. 8. May all this remain undefiled by the stains, keeping in view the 8 worldly principles. May I, by perceiving all dharmas as elusive, may I, unattached, be delivered from bondage, samsara. By understanding the lack of inherent existence of all nature, we can understand the elusive nature or the illusion of all phenomena. Practice infinite altruism with the help of wisdom. That's the way.